Welcome to Fantasy Enterprise. Today we have a 2013 smart car valve cover replacement. I did this without dropping the engine. I would say it's 6 out of 10. Not the easiest job, but not the hardest either. A lot of tight spaces, and I wouldn't recommend doing it more than once. First thing first, what you want to do is you want to get access to the valve cover gasket. Everyone does this job differently, but how I would start is I would start by removing all the clips and the sensors. So there is a lot of sensors and wires, but you kind of just gotta wiggle it and see where they go and how you can disconnect it and find out where they're located. But once you're able to get them all off, what you want to do is you want to kind of remember where you pulled them out from and where they go back into. It's not the biggest or the hardest thing to do, but it is something that you're gonna want to keep in mind when you put it back together. Thankfully for this, because everything is so compact, it's limited on how long and where the cables go. So for the most part, you can pretty much tell where what sensor goes where and which wire goes back where just because it's not much length. Like it'll just go so far where you're like, okay, it has to be in this general vicinity. All right, next up, we got, you guessed it, more clips and sensors. There is a ton of them, okay? And I would get yourself a nice solid screwdriver or some sort of pry tool to get these sensors. And make sure that when you're doing it carefully and not overdoing it and using too much pressure, because if you snap something or tear something or break something, it's gonna be a lot more work than you wanted to go for. So just make sure you're careful with everything. And remember, they're clips for a reason. There's a certain type of way you got to open them. So as you can see, this is my buddy Kerpow, or we call him Cowboy Chris. He's just attacking it, just going at it. Not sure what to do, but he's just going at it. He knows he needs to get to the valve cover gasket, and he's taking everything off to do so. So as you can see, we've moved the sensors and plugs. So now we're moving vacuum lines. That vacuum line had a OEM hose clamp. You could just take it off. Once you take that off, I don't think they're reusable. And even if they were, I wouldn't reuse them. Um, you could just put them back with a regular hose clamp and you should be all good to go. Okay. And then next up, we had ignition coils. As you can see, there's three of them right there. So there's three 10 millimeter to get to those ignition coils, one on each of them. What I would recommend is using a magnet such as this. This is a really compact and tight area, and if you drop the bolts, they're either one, go all the way to the bottom, or two, they'll fall in a very specific spot, and it's in the heat shield. Some people have taken it off to get the job done. I personally didn't, but it is something I've heard that does make it easier. It's only a couple extra bolts, but here's me going in there with my hands, just to attack the bolts, and as you can see, there's really not much wiggle room, but there are the bolts. And this is, as you can tell, we try to do as much live action as we could get. We try to get you the raw, you know, non-edited truth to what it is to really tackle this job. We did this at night. Probably shouldn't have, but we did. We wanted to just get to it, and then we were gonna put it back on in the morning, which is what we did. But well, once you get those bolts out, you're gonna want to remove the ignition coils. There's three of them, and right there, that silver piece with the hose coming out of it, that's the EGR valve, and it has a stem coming out of it, and it goes towards the bottom. You're gonna want to remove the hose, the EGR valve, the tube connected to it. So, but yeah, basically once you get the sensors, the cords all the way out of the way, clips, hoses, all that good stuff, you can start attacking the valve cover gasket. There should be a total of 10 millimeters around the valve cover gasket. Some look like they're on the valve, but they're not. They're not going through it, they're just on top of it. So keep in mind, but there's 10 around. Yeah, make sure you don't lose the bolts and pay attention to the sizing of each bolt. For the most part, all the 10 millimeters are all the same size. At the end, I did mix up one bolt, so bad on me, but hopefully you don't make that same mistake. I just had to swap it out. It wasn't something huge, but you know, it's something you deal with as you take part in this mechanic journey, but it is what it is. Just make sure you pay attention. As you can see, we're getting closer. We're finally getting to get to the valve cover gasket and take it off. So the top ones are the easy ones to get into, but the ones on the side and lower towards the bottom and around the valve cover gasket, those ones are the non-fun ones. So right there on the right side, there's going to be three screws. So there's two on the bracket and then one hidden behind it. And these are, for the most part, more difficult to get to. What I realize is it's so much easier to attack it from the inside of the car rather than outside the car, like behind the trunk. If you actually go inside the car and then attack it from the inside of the car, from the seats, you'll get a better angle on these bolts, is what I learned. If you're not huge and can get inside the car and go in between the two seats. But yeah, you see there's two on the bracket, and then right there, right under my finger, when I'm lifting it, I'm also recording at the same time, so it's hard to see. But yeah, you'll see it right there. That bolt on the top right of the screen. You see that? Where the hand is? It's right between the cable and the bracket. That's that one last screw. And that one, my friend, is a lot tougher to get to. But if I remember correctly, I got it from the inside when I was in the car. And a torque wrench, electric torque wrench, comes in clutch. You got like a Milwaukee one, 3/8 one, put a 10 millimeter on it, little short extension. You'll be able to attack those real nice. But I kid you not, we were struggling with that one boat. As you can see, we were going for it. We're going for it. Continuing to attack it. Yep, but as you can see here, we're starting to make progress with it. We eventually get it off. Right here, you can see that cord has a little bit of a burn to it. It's just because that starts tapping on the engine when it's hot and it overheats, starts melting. So check your wires for that potentially. And if you do see it, then I would definitely rewrap it with some electrical tape just so that way it could get an extra protection if it happens to go and fall on the engine again. But yeah, there you can see the bolt under the bracket or behind the bracket, and that's the last valve cover. And I'm pretty sure that's where it was leaking from, because that the valve cover is tilted down at an angle. So I'm pretty sure that's where all the oil was spilling out of, and that's why you can see just everything caked in oil right there around that pan in that area. Finally, we start to crack it, get it going just a tad bit. All right, and then we started to do the same thing for the bolts on the other side of the valve cover gasket. That was where we removed that special hose from earlier. But yep, hidden in between there is another 10 millimeter bolts towards the bottom of the engine. Yeah, the bottom ones are super annoying to get to if you haven't noticed by now. All right, next thing up is we want to get underneath the car and loosen up this e-Torx bolt. We don't want to take it off, um, but we do definitely want to lower it enough so then that way we can get our wrench in there behind the bar to be able to get those bolts off. So just enough to get it loose, and then there's some play in the bar, but not enough to fully remove it. You can see here, I start playing with it. But yeah, we want to get access so we can have sockets clear, enough clearance to get to those other e-Torx bolt. And that's the bracket that's holding the EGR valve in. I had to help guide my buddy in, and then he just totally fell off. But then all of a sudden was able to get it himself. Isn't that funny? I swear, watching this like live, someone removing the bolts, going back, watching this gives you anxiety, I swear. It's crazy. But yep, those are that you see why, see how close and so small that clearance is, and that's why we had to drop that bar so we can get enough room to get a ratchet or a socket in there and be able to actually get to the bolt. As you can see, my oil pan was leaking pretty bad. It's leaking oil everywhere. All right, on the bottom of the engine, between the heat pan and the other stuff, that's the end to the EGR valve. So this is us at the top of it. And we were able to get the two bolts off on the other end of the EGR valve. The top one's, of course, easy. The bottom one, not as much, but this is what it looks like after you take out the EGR valve and get it off the bracket and whatnot. So now you're able to finally get to the valve cover gasket. And look at that. Oil everywhere. That valve cover is caked in oil. All right, now that I got the valve cover off, I want to show you basically where the screws were sitting. There you can see at the top, that screw, that screw to get the airbox out the way. One on the left, one right there, another one right there under there, And then those two with the brackets, annoying ones. Yep, that's it. All right, now step is optional, but I wanted to do it just because I was already in there, and spark plugs are really cheap, and you know, you want to do it. The engine has 100,000 miles. I'm pretty sure those are original spark plugs. So I went ahead and just replaced them. Pretty straightforward, but you want to remove them. I put two back in. You want to make sure that part I'm touching goes towards the bottom and don't put it back in backwards. And you want to make sure that when you are putting spark plugs in, don't over tighten them because you could do some serious damage to your engine. And you don't want to cross thread as well. All right, and then just make sure you get that spark plug in there snug, but not too tight. All right, lastly, you want to make sure you clean the valve cover really well. We went and took a wire wheel and went around the edges of the valve cover. Make sure you do it real gently and not to damage it or dent it or scratch it. And then after we put the RTV gasket sealer and the gasket on top, and then put it back on.